Let me start with 10 things I love about community radio. The programme that washes over the hourly line, the woman who answers my question, what the hell are you doing on the radio? Sharply heterodox, biased, unbalanced, well-argued opinion, music I've never heard, and better still, music I've never heard of, a format I don't immediately recognise as news or drama, well-read poetry, vox pops that aren't sliced and diced, live sports commentary from places and about sports I've never even dreamed of, campaigns to keep local government honest, and flexible scheduling. And here are 10 things I don't like. BBC Radio 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6 wannabes, smugness, sentimentality, synthetic hysteria, hosts who are more important than their guests or their music. Just think about that. Playlists, same old people, same old times, same old formats, reasonableness, self-consciousness, and deliberate obscurantism. I know these are two impossible lists and they don't act as natural opposites. But if you want the BBC sort of radio, you shouldn't be here. And if you wanted a BBC-type speaker, you shouldn't have asked me. And while I'm at it, it might be obvious already that I'm not speaking on behalf of Ofcom. I'm not here to be deliberately provocative, just to behave the way I want you to behave. In other words, I'm a kind of representation of what you are. I'm here to say what I think you want to say. We're almost certainly going to agree that there are currently 3 challenges facing community radio, apart from the obvious one of funding. And I wasn't asked to come and speak on fundraising, so I won't. Except to quote my wife on the subject, if fundraising was easy, charlatans would do it. It has to be difficult for the passion to cut through the crap. Well, actually, she's far too nice to have said that last bit, but she means it. Our 3 challenges are artificial regulation, multimedia convergence, and postmodernism. Artificial regulation isn't easy to fix, but it's obvious what it entails. The commercial radio sector got far too generous a deal when community radio started, and restrictions on what we do are outrageously partisan. Commercial radio, in some ways, is as bad as banking and agriculture in its pleading for special favours. We're always being told by politicians, not least David Cameron, that businesses have to be entrepreneurial and they have to be prepared to face failure. Snap. I'm all in favour of social gain, but I don't like somebody else telling me what it is, as if I'm not grown up enough to know. What makes us need tighter controls on everything we do than our competitors? Are we likely to try to move our objectives by stealth? Would we eat up the competition if we could? And if we did, what difference would that make? We're told that communities of practice are rapidly replacing communities of geography. So why can't community radio be both local, regional and national? Why should religious stations need a local spot in every town? Why can't we have gardening radio and gaming radio and drama radio as well as national commercial stations? Well, that's only 3, but it leads into the second point about convergence. The notion of community radio, defined by geography, spectrum, social gain, and financial regulation, is pure daft. Why shouldn't internet radio be eligible for community radio fund panel grants? Why isn't our experience being employed at the heart of the enterprise to find a model for community television? Wouldn't some of us be better off with a laser-sharp focus on telephone and tablet access? Above all, now that the cost of making video has plummeted, Why isn't there a community media fund which takes care of audio-visual as well as audio only? It will soon be time to stop calling this material radio or television, even if these two user interfaces survive another 50 years. And why isn't community radio self-regulated through the CMA rather than Ofcom? I haven't asked this question to either the CMA or Ofcom because their answers might be rather blunter than this speech. But you should be asking these questions. I know that the Press Complaints Commission gives self-regulation a bad name, but there are many examples of good self-regulation. But I think that the third problem, that of postmodernism, will take the most sorting out. What I mean by postmodernism in this context is the widening gap between global capitalist media enterprise on the one hand and pathetic, self-indulgent, self-publishing on the other. Community radio has a proper place in the expanding no man's land where small was once beautiful. I'm not getting sentimental about this. In music production, gaming, software and conventional book publishing, small enterprises have grown and sold themselves to bigger enterprises, leaving space for new, small enterprises to emerge. But it hasn't happened in television, and it isn't happening enough in radio. Now, most of you might not want to be swallowed up, and of course, you don't want to die of starvation either. So there has to be better national branding for community radio that marks out its place in the market. There has to be shared marketing where stations are not in direct competition. And there has to be a commercial model for archive material without building a massive database, and an intelligent dialogue with the public that wants to self-publish, saving it from becoming the worst phone-in the world. And above all, the capacity to make programs that neither imitate the global brand nor fall into the swamp of self-indulgent blogging and tweeting and texting and emailing. This is a tough space to be in, and we're entitled to better and stronger allies. We're worth more than the public sector funding of a single opera. We're worth more than a stand-in role if BBC local radio collapses. We're worth more than also-ran status in the radio world. As long as we concentrate on doing more, well, approximately of the 10 things I like, and less of the 10 things approximately I don't like, we'll be worth more still. What will keep us alive is not more funding, though that would help, and that's our natural instinctive plea. It's our ability to be passionate about the alternative space we've been given, and onto which we're holding fiercely but precariously. I would urge every station to get a local celebrity champion, lobby their MP for attention as much as cash, make one series of programmes that blows the station's mind and that of its listeners, drop one series of programmes you know shouldn't be there, spend more time with your university, FE media department and the PR people in national and local charities, understand your local creative ecology, e.g. in my village of 5,000 people, there's a local author book launch in the bookshop at least once a month. Seriously question the old-fashioned station manager model as the focus of most of your expenditure. Ask if you really need most of your broadcasting to be done from one place. Cadge your town centre broadcasting space from a property company with unused capacity. And make sure other people enjoy you as much as you enjoy yourselves. But maybe best of all, stop making lists like these and just start crossing things off. So what's that got to do with a big society? Essentially this. Depending on how you look at the big society, it's either a liberating move away from regulation or it's a device for forcing the voluntary sector to pick up the services dropped by the public sector. The important thing to bear in mind is that conservatives are natural supporters of deregulation, but they can't help telling the poor and the weak what to do. So the big society might be an ostensible liberator, but it might also push us into places where we don't want to be. For instance, filling any gap made by BBC cuts. So what we have to do is to go on doing what we're doing, but better and sharper. High-quality community radio should keep the state honest, but it can only do that if it's honest to itself. If Cameron really wants the big society, make sure he gets it. Make sure there are thousands of voices, unlimited perspectives, and countless awkward questions. This isn't a time for fairness, it's a time for a break with the terrible dichotomy which the BBC is tied into. If Cameron wants, in Mao's words, 100 flowers to bloom, then make sure he gets what he wants. He might even be more careful for what he wishes. Thank you.
I just want to know how much your opinion is shared by BBC and the other established broadcast media?
That's a kind of a big question. It's a bit like, what's America like? My opinion is shared by a lot of people in what I call the Edge of Multimedia. I spend most of my time with tablets, with telephones, with internet publishing, rather than with old-fashioned spectrum stuff. I suspect that it's shared by a lot of you, because I listen to community radio every time I drop into a town that's got one. And there's still a lot of heterodox stuff going on, and that's great. I couldn't possibly speak for what the BBC wants, because it's a huge corporation with a lot of competing demands and competing needs. But what matters for you, for us, is this new push into audience that's going to be made possible. I mean, one of the dichotomies in public broadcasting of all kinds, including community radio, is you might aspire to reach certain communities of interest, ethnic minorities, alienated people, whatever. But you can't guarantee necessarily that that's what you get just because that's what you want. My experience is that not very many socially alienated people listen to spoken word radio, for instance. So, but they might do it if it went onto a tablet, a mobile phone, or a games console or whatever. It's just that we've got to start getting away from the cathode ray and the Baker light that's still in the back of our heads and go somewhere else.
Anybody got any more questions?
How do you meet the challenge of actually, I don't know, shaping up a radio station? Because it depends on the goodwill of volunteers, the dedication of the volunteers.
But one of the serious jobs of community radio is to upset people. Sorry. You know, let me say very quickly that when I used to work in an organisation where I had a couple of thousand staff, I have to say, every person who ever came to me was better than they thought they were, particularly women coming back to work after rearing children. And they'd say to me things like, but for the past 10 years, all I've done is bring up 3 children. I said, my God, that's more difficult than being Henry Kissinger. For goodness sake, that's a fantastic skill, because you can do a lot of different things, parallel process. Most volunteers do what, like most human beings, do the things that really enthuses them and interests them, and also they do the thing they think they're good at. They might actually be good at quite different things. I never hire a volunteer in the position I'm now in without asking them very open questions about what they're good at, what they might be good at, what they'd like to do, what they've dreamed of doing but can't do. Because that opens it up from your end. From the listener end, if you want to be in the conventional airspace, you'll never be as slick as the people you're trying to imitate in slickness. It's simply got to sound like what I call radio being made on the anvil, rather than radio that's made by injection moulding and plopped out. It's actually got to have some sparks about it, and it's got to have a few rough edges. I don't mean by being horribly unprofessional, but I simply mean that you don't want it to be all neat and tidy. It's a process of going on, which is why I love programs that cross the hour line, because what's going on is so good at the time, people just let it go. That's great. You know, we've got to stop now for the weather is the curse of the Today program. I don't want you to have to do it.
How do you get away from the cathode ray tube and Bakelite?
Well,
without falling into the self-congratulatory blogging Twitterness.
Well, it's about the content doesn't have to. You know, Marshall McLuhan's thing about the media being the message. The content doesn't actually have to be some sort of have some tight partnership with the medium that delivers it. For instance, there's good television and crap television. There's good radio and crap radio. The fact that mobile phones are currently 4G phones are going to be held onto by early adopters who are going to want certain sort of things isn't going to force the medium in the long term to go away one way or the other. What the medium will simply allow you to do is to deliver good audio content with some visual support, if that's what you want, or good multimedia content that gets delivered simply over a different network to a different set of user interfaces. The problem with the cathode ray and the Bakelite is that it makes people think about really the way the media was before 1990. I mean, I don't think that a lot of the media have actually come to grips with what's happened since 1990. There are still too many people running radio and television as if we were in a pretty closed cartel-like system. There just isn't enough stuff bursting out of the edges. It's still all too tidy. I get depressed by how tidy it is. But untidiness doesn't mean low quality. It simply means that you've got to do it in a way that keeps you in focus on what you're doing, but doesn't necessarily follow the conventional ways of doing it. Just got to be more inventive.